Roman Empire.
Rome is civilization. Rome is order. Rome is power. We are Rome.
Mongol Empire. Ottoman Empire. Mughals. British. The formula was always the same. Bigger army, bigger treasury, bigger logistics, bigger cannons. History rarely asks who was morally right. History usually asks who had the bigger supply chain. Modern politics isn't very different. The battlefield has changed, the strategy hasn't. Nobody rides elephants anymore. Now they ride social media algorithms. Cannons have become campaign funds. Forts have become television studios. Messengers have become Godi anchors.
Chaat chaat chaat, हाँ chaat chaat chaat, मिलके chaat, अकेले में chaat.
More money, more workers, more advertisements, more influencers, more call centers, more war rooms, more reach, more rallies, more volunteers. We have the ED, the CBI, the Income Tax Department, the Election Commission, mainstream media, and entire religious institutions acting as a unified orchestra.
हम सब इस देश को हिंदू राष्ट्र बनाने के लिए लड़ेंगे, मरेंगे, जरूरत पड़ी तो हारेंगे। भारत माता की।
History shows that when the state becomes the church and the church becomes the state, the citizen stops asking for roads and starts asking for proceeds. Majoritarian politics works the same way. More identity crisis, more cultural anxiety, more emotional engineering, more historical revision, more magnificent monuments, more forgotten schools.
सड़क नहीं चाहिए, रोटी नहीं चाहिए, मंदिर चाहिए.
Karl Marx once famously said that religion is the opium of the masses. If you are addicted to alcohol or narcotics, society has rehab centers. You can detox, your family can intervene, your friends can pull you back. But there are no de-addiction centers for religious polarization. The most terrifying thing about this addiction is its psychology. A typical addict hits rock bottom, looks in the mirror and realizes they need help. But the polarization addict doesn't think they are sick. They think they are awake. They think they are chosen. They think they are the last line of defense for an ancient, glorious civilization. And why would the empire ever build a de-addiction center? The empire isn't the doctor, the empire is the cartel. And a successful cartel never wants its customers to get clean. They need you to stay permanently high on the intoxicating fumes of an imaginary crusade.
कहाँ जा रहे हैं भैया?
हम घर घर अब ये तलवार वितरण करने जा रहे हैं
अपने हिंदू
और अपने हिंदू सनातनियों को सबको उनको देंगे और कहेंगे वो स्वयं अपनी रक्षा करें कि कुछ नहीं पता कुत्तों का झुंड कब तुम पे हमला कर दे, कौन जिहादी हमारी बहन बेटियों घर में घुस कर कुछ करे तो उनके पास एक ही शस्त्र उनके पास होना चाहिए।
इसलिए हम घर घर जाकर वितरण कर रहे हैं तो शस्त्रों का
What the nation desperately needs to scrutinize today is the profound, unbridgeable chasm between a religion and a political ideology, between Hinduism and Hindutva. Hinduism is a sprawling, decentralized, thousands of year old ocean of spiritual thought. It has no single founder, no single pope, no single central headquarters, no universal creed that every Hindu must believe, and no rigid binding dogma. Within its traditions, you will find devotion, meditation, ritual, philosophy, yoga, mysticism, logic, even schools that question the existence of God itself. It is less like a single book and more like an enormous library. Sometimes the books disagree with one another, yet they remain on the same shelf. Take the Charvak or Lokayata schools of ancient Indian philosophy. They didn't just quietly question the existence of the divine. They openly mocked the priests. They dismissed the sacred texts, and they publicly argued that heaven and hell were just profitable scams invented by men who didn't want to do manual labor. Their philosophy was brutally simple: perception over superstition, evidence over authority, reason over revelation. Yavat jivet sukham jivet, rinam kritva ghritam pivet. As long as you live happily. Borrow it and drink ghee if you want, because once this body is burned to ashes. Bhasmi buddhasya dihasya punaragamanam kuta. How can even return? They openly declared that the authors of the sacred texts were nothing but buffoons, knaves, and demons. They rejected karma. They rejected the afterlife. They completely rejected the divine. And what did the ancient kings and sages do to them? Did they declare them anti-nationals? Did they send the ancient equivalent of the ED to raid their ashrams? Did they send a mob with bulldozers to crush their homes? No. They invited them into the royal courts. They debated them. They recorded their arguments. They gave them a seat at the table. Because a civilization that is truly secure in its own spiritual depth is never terrified of a question mark. That is a civilization. That is Hinduism. A spiritual philosophy confident enough to sit at a table with its absolute harshest critics and pour them a cup of tea. But Hindutva is terrified of absolutely everything.
आमिर खान लगातार हिंदू बहन बेटियों से शादी रचा करके लाइन लगा रहा है। हिंदुओं का जो है इससे अपमान हो रहा है। हिंदू समाज को जो है चैलेंज कर रहा है कि देखो मैंने लगातार हिंदू बेटी से शादी कर रहा है और कहाँ है कोर्ट, कहाँ है कानून, कहाँ है विधि व्यवस्था, ये वो चैलेंज कर रहा है। मैं बता देना चाहता हूँ आप लोगों को कि आमिर खान बहुत बड़ी साजिश के तहत हिंदुओं को कमजोर करने का काम कर रहा है।
जिस तरह से आमिर खान ने 3 शादी किया और तीनों हिंदू लड़कियों से किया है और इस उम्र में जब मरने का समय है तो वह सिर्फ जो है ये संदेश देने के लिए लव जिहाद का, ऐसे लोगों को तो बिल्कुल जो है ये जहां कहीं भी मिले इनको तो तुरंत मार देना चाहिए।
Hinduism survived thousands of years of the most rigorous existential questioning from its own greatest sages. Hindutva cannot even survive a 15-second sarcastic reel on Instagram. Hinduism encourages looking inward to conquer the ego. Hindutva demands looking outward to target an enemy. Hinduism is an open, welcoming library where every book is allowed to argue with the next. Hindutva is a censor's red pen. crossing out every chapter that compromises the regime. Hinduism belongs to the seekers. Hindutva belongs entirely to the managers of the cartel. By intentionally blurring the lines between the two, the cartel has managed to turn a vast, peaceful, spiritual heritage into a hyper-aggressive, weaponized voting bloc. They have convinced millions of devout, gentle believers that to love their faith, they must learn to hate their neighbor. They didn't sit down with the Vedas or the Upanishads to outline the dream of statecraft. They sat down with the work of Giuseppe Mazzini and the manifestos of the 19th century European political romanticism. One language, one race, one culture, one absolute uniform identity.
स्वतंत्रता के लिए हमारी एक ही पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी होनी चाहिए, हिंदुत्व।
मतलब हिंदू धर्म?
नहीं, हिंदुत्व हिंदू धर्म नहीं।
They didn't want a population of gentle, detached, spiritual seekers. He wanted a highly militarized, a politically cohesive voting battalion. The most important part of Savarkar's definition rested on two concepts: Pitrubhumi, fatherland, and Punyabhumi, motherland.
असिंधु सिंधु पर्यंत यस्य भारत भूमिका पितृभू पुण्यभूश्चैव सा वै हिंदू रीति स्मृता।
If your ancestors were born here and your prophets received their revelations here, you effortlessly pass the loyalty audit. But if your sacred spaces happen to lie across the geopolitical borders, in Mecca, in Jerusalem, in Rome, your physical existence is framed as demographic infiltration.
मैं देखता हूं घुसपैठियों को बचाने में तुम कितनी ताकत लगाते हो और घुसपैठियों को हटाने में हम कैसे अपना जीवन लगा देते हैं। हो जाए मुकाबला।
And we are our nation who defined. M.S. Golwalkar didn't quote the peaceful universalism of the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. He openly looked across the seas to 1930s Europe, explicitly praising the hyper-nationalistic, exclusionary methods of Germany to maintain its race purity as a masterclass India should learn from. Fast forward to the present. What was once a fringe imported ideology tucked away in a Nagpur library has now become the absolute unyielding executive blueprint of the modern state. We aren't just witnessing a standard political shift. We are watching the systematic real-time reconstruction of a secular republic into de facto theocracy, brick by holy brick. The Prime Minister is no longer presented as merely the chief executive officer of a democracy. He is relentlessly marketed as the supreme high priest of a civilizational revival. The new parliament isn't just a house of debate and legislation anymore. It was quite literally inaugurated with royal scepters, chanting praise and ancient rituals designed to look less like a modern democratic assembly and much more like the court of a divine emperor. But when you proudly declare that you are creating a civilizational state, you are making a devastating admission. You are admitting that you are actively destroying a constitutional, because you cannot have both. A constitutional state looks at a diverse, sprawling population and says, we are united by shared democratic future. A civilizational state looks at the exact same population and says, we are divided by permanent historical past. But why? Why spend so much multi-crore energy fighting battles that ended centuries ago? Because to answer this, I have to borrow a quote from George Orwell. He who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past. If you control the past, you control the grievance. If you control the grievance, you control the anger. And if you control the anger, you completely control the ballot box of tomorrow. हर हर मोदी, घर घर मोदी, फिर एक बार मोदी सरकार।
अब की बार मोदी सरकार।
कमल का बटन दबाएंगे, भाजपा जिताएंगे।